This is the Actual Fluency Podcast, helping you become a better language learner by providing motivating weekly inspiration, as well as top tips and tricks from expert guests. And now, your host, Chris Broholm.
All right, everyone, we're back with another episode of the Actual Fluency Podcast. And on the show today, I'm joined by Tetsu Yung, who's going to talk about raising children bilingually, multilingually, raising small polyglots, basically. And we're also going to talk about the upcoming North American Polyglot Symposium, which is going to be very interesting. But first of all, Tetsu, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Chris. Thank you. I'm very honored to be on here. Well, really good. I'm it's a morning here. It's a great, beautiful day, and it's not too cold in Canada. So
Fantastic.
It's always a good start.
When it's not too cold, that's Canadian positivity right there.
That's right.
So before we get into today's topic of raising children multilingually, why don't you give a story of how you got into languages, which I presume had been at a very young age?
Yes. To really start from the beginning, I was born in Hong Kong. It's as early as I can go. And my father is Taiwanese. My mother is Japanese. So they met in Hong Kong, and I was born there. But shortly after, I was back in Taiwan. The whole family moved back. And so in Taiwan, I grew up speaking Mandarin to my father. That's the official language in Taiwan. And I spoke Japanese with my mother. Living in Taiwan. So those two languages are a no-brainer. Then in Taiwan, there's other minor, well, I would say not languages, but there's dialects and stuff like Hakka, spoken by my father's side. There's Taiwanese, which is a very big language in Taiwan, spoken in the streets, all my neighbors and friends. So right away from young age, I was exposed to many of these different languages. I've always had to switch around depending on who I was talking to. And when I was 6, my parents decided to send me to an American school, so that's where I got my English. And when I graduated from that elementary school, I moved to Canada and to Quebec. That's where the French comes in. So by the time I was 13, I was exposed to my 5th. I guess I was 5th. Sometimes I lose count depending on whether we count Hakka and stuff as languages or major languages. I usually say I have 5 languages. So the main ones are English, French, Chinese, Japanese, and Spanish, which I picked up later. But with these other minor languages, Hakka and Taiwanese, which I can use when I go back to Taiwan, it all brings up to about 8, 9, 10 languages, with including other languages that I studied at the university, like German, Italian, Portuguese, which I never claim that I can speak them because I really don't. I know them academically to a certain degree, but I don't really converse with them very, very well.
Right.
So that's how it came about. These different languages, some academically learned, some, but mostly the ones that I use, that I consider myself fluent in, I've really have absorbed them sort of, based on how I was raised. And that's really an important aspect, I think.
Right. Do you know if it's a common thing in Taiwan to grow up with this kind of 2-language system, or do you think most people
no. Most people in Taiwan speak Mandarin and Taiwanese. Okay. I think 70 or 75% of the people in Taiwan speak Taiwanese also. And then their regional dialect like Hakka and other stuff. So like many Asian countries, they're very keen on English education, like now, in recent years, I guess, all these English cram schools. But essentially, it's Mandarin and Taiwanese. These are the 2 major languages that people grow up with.
All right, cool. And as a child, did you feel, let's say, different, or do you have any kind of multilingual memories of growing up with 2, let's say, pretty different native languages at the same time?
I never really thought about it. It's just reality. So by the time like my earliest memories would be, I don't know, 3 or 4. I would remember myself talking in Japanese to my mother, Mandarin with my father, Hakka with my grandparents and aunts, and Taiwanese in the streets. I never remembered how I learned. I just remembered speaking them. So
That's super interesting
yeah,
because
I
when
do.
you look outside in, it's just
Hmm.
it's almost like well, at least for many countries, it's like how are they doing that? What are they putting
Yeah.
in the water? You know?
Yeah. I mean, I could ask you the same thing. Do you remember when you started learning Danish? I mean,
No.
I mean, nobody thinks about when they first learned their native language
Right.
because, you just picked it up as an infant.
Right.
So that's how it is with these languages. I do remember when I wasn't able to speak English because I only started English when I went to the American school that I told you about when I was 6. So I do remember being very anxious, or very, about going to that school. I was worried. I was asking my parents, these guys do speak Mandarin, right? Somewhere in my little head, I was just praying and hoping that I could still communicate in Mandarin somehow. But that
Right.
wasn't the case because these were all foreign kids who were there, so most of them didn't speak Mandarin. So,
Of course,
so
you were thrown in.
I remember not being able to speak it and then picking it up, you know,
It's so
by going to
crazy,
school.
right?
Hmm.
When you're an adult and you want to learn languages and you're like,
Yeah,
how do I do this the best way? And you
yeah,
think back to it just kind of happened, It's like
exactly.
I don't
That's a
remember how
great,
I learned English. It's like I went to class and played video games, and suddenly I just spoke English at a young
there you
age. And
go.
it's like,
Yeah,
where does it come from? I guess we are so biologically tuned to the fact that when you're young, you need to get those languages quickly. Otherwise, you're never gonna make it, I guess. I don't know. I don't know where it comes
uh,
from.
well, I mean, kids, right? They get together, and even though they don't speak, even when they're like 1 or 2, when they just start walking, they start interacting, and they don't speak per se, but
Right.
they do know that they want that Tonka truck, from the other kid, and they're gonna go in and do whatever they can, whether it's wrestling or speaking or doing something, and
Right.
that's how they communicate, and they fight, and they play together, and they just sort of learn together
Is
and
is
absorb
it
it,
lack of
right?
fear in a way that,
Yeah, yeah. Big
when
word, yeah.
when we
Fear,
grow
the
up, we
lack of
sort
it.
of learn to, I guess, control our inner child and become
Yeah,
sort of withdrawn in a way, just relaxed, and we
you're
don't
right.
just.
You're absolutely right. I
But,
think this
hmm,
fear is a huge element. So children, they
they're
don't know.
fearless, man.
Yeah, they just
That's
don't know. They just use whatever they have, and they speak it and they use it. And all the language textbooks will tell you to do this, like practice and practice and use it and use it. But usually people are reserved to use a language until they have a certain proficiency, and I guess that's what's really different with kids.
right.
When they have 5 words, they use those 5 words, and they just do it, right?
Right, yeah. It's so crazy to think about how scary it is to be an adult in a way because
Yeah,
we're conditioned to the fact that we can't just ask any question we want all the time, and we have to not interrupt everyone when they're speaking. And
that's right.
there's like
Yeah.
all these social principles that we're blocked by. But I'm just thinking about this, how serious it is actually is, because I guess there are two categories of people. You have people who are mainly extroverts and people who are mainly introverts. And
Hmm.
extroverts might find it easier to just go out and use those 5 words they have. But if somebody like me who's introverted, primarily, I don't like to put myself in a box, but primarily, I mean, I get scared of the idea of going down and ordering something in Hungarian, even though I can do it. And even if I can't do it, I mean, what's the worst that's going to happen? They're going to
Yeah.
look at me weird, and they're going to be like, another guy is doing it wrong, mostly not, but
Hmm.
and it doesn't even help by after practice, because I like Subway is my favorite fast food, and there's a Subway just around the corner, and I go there maybe once a week or something. And so now I can do the whole process in Hungarian now. But there are still some days where I go down there and I have this fear, and I just, it's almost a panic, where I just like, oh my God, what if I say something wrong? And so even with practice, I feel like it doesn't go away. So
yeah, it probably never will.
Probably never will. Well, I can just get better, I guess.
Exactly. I mean, it's a gradient, right? It'll be less and less as you progress, I assume.
Right, but then you need it less and less too, though. So that's kind of
Yeah.
like when you're good enough to not have fear, you probably have such a good language that you don't really learn anything by doing it anyway.
Yeah.
So, I just find it a really fascinating topic because people constantly talk about, how you should learn languages as a kid, which is obviously a complete myth, or like we should learn languages like a kid, which a lot of people say is impossible, and a lot of people try to recreate sort of the environment. But it's just a very interesting discussion on how adults can learn something from kids, I guess, in a way.
Yeah. There are, from what I've read, there are biological, physiological differences apparently in the brain, like for kids to be able to absorb and learn languages better. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. I'm not saying it is one way or the other. Probably is. But either way, from my own experience growing up like this and from what I see in my children now, I'm just gonna believe that children are better somehow to learn languages. And whether it's physiological or psychological, whatever the barrier is that, we'll maybe one day be able to clarify and have adults learn just as well as kids. At least for my own kids and for myself, I can say that it doesn't hurt to just start early. Just
right.
And
there's no denying that kids are probably better at language acquisition than adults in general. But the point is that some adults use it as an excuse to not learn a language because they say,
correct.
"Oh, I can't learn because I'm not a kid anymore."
Yeah.
That's kind of the excuse that I wanted to get rid of, because that would be like saying, "Oh, Benny Lewis can learn whatever language in 3 months and have a conversation with locals, and I need to have 6 months." So if there's a difference in how adults can learn, then it doesn't really matter how bad you are because you will eventually learn it, right? So it's not about speed; it's just about doing. But anyway, it's still interesting to really look at how kids learn and see if there's anything we can do. And I think the just use it mentality, the lack of fear, and the inquisitive nature of their minds is really, because they want to know everything, right? They ask all the questions, like what's that, and that translates to language, I guess, because they're like, what does that word mean? How does that word work with that word? And so I don't know, maybe we should just be more curious in general.
Agree.
So I guess that could be your next projects when the kids grow up. You could have like how to learn languages like a kid.
I wouldn't be the first one to study that.
Right.
I'm sure there's like hundreds of academics out there who've been trying to decipher it, and they, a lot of them go into the neuroscience, a lot of them go into the psychology of it, and I'm no expert in any of that.
It's a tough field.
It is, and I guess for me, what's important is not really to know how a car works. If I can drive it, that's what's important. So I see the results, and that's how I'm going to do it with respect to how I raise my kids.
All right, well, let's get into that, because you've written a book on Amazon on how to raise kids bilingually. So I guess we should get into that topic or multilingually, sorry. So what's the first thing that people should sort of think about? If, let's say, they have a kid, maybe it's 1 year or he's less than 1 year old, and they want to sort of bring that kid up with as many languages as possible. So what are the first steps they should consider?
Okay, there's various angles to that. I want to take just a second to really analyze your question well. No, I mean, there's one thing is what we talked about a bit earlier, which languages to choose and why.
Right.
Because I'm not a big fan of, like you said earlier, also of going for quantity only.
Right.
There's a specific reason why you pick certain languages. A lot of them very simple. It's like it's your native language. You want to use your own native language to speak with your kid. Fine, of course. But other ones, it's the language of education in the country where you're living. It is the language of your spouse. It is there's other like economical reasons. For example, learning English. It's a very important commercial language in the world. So we want want your kids to learn that. There's various reasons. Whatever it is, I guess first know which ones you want to learn and for what reasons. That gives you the motivation to continue.
Right.
Not, whenever you face an obstacle, you go, oh, maybe it's not that important after all. You wouldn't want to go there. I was just doing it for fun anyways, that kind of thing.
Right. Some parents might be overly ambitious and say like, I want my child to learn 10 languages, and
that's right.
It's kind of like
not that they can't, but you trade off depth for width sometimes.
Right.
But you can go pretty wide. Like I'm raising my kids to speak 5 languages, and I think I for my living context, I can do it pretty well. So I do it, and I have a specific reason for each of the languages that I'm teaching them.
Right. And I suppose once you teach a child 5 languages and they grow up in this sort of multilingual environment, they might naturally get the interest later to add on 5 more languages. So how many they want. But it's a very free choice, and if they get into music, it's like whatever. They got 5 languages, so it's still better than 99% of the world, or at least more languages than 99% of the world. So
that's right. So that I think it is the first point. Know which languages you want to learn and how you want to teach your kids, and then just go for it early. Like when I say early, I mean from the time that your wife is pregnant. When you talk
you speak to them in
I mean that's how I did it. Even before they were born, when I was talking to my wife's tummy, I would use Mandarin because I decided I was gonna be covering Mandarin, and she was gonna do Japanese, and we're gonna different languages will come at different times. And this brings me to another important point. So we've talked about first which languages, then talked about going early, like as early as possible. Just start using it. Even though some people say, oh, they can do it when they're 6 or whatever. I start early, even before they know how to talk, because they're already absorbing it.
Yeah.
Okay? And then third point is what is called OPOL, OPOL, one person, one language.
Okay.
Okay. Just because I can speak 5 languages, I don't switch around. I cover Mandarin. Strategically, I use Mandarin only with my kids. So they talk whenever they talk to me, it'll be in Mandarin.
Right.
It's a very natural thing. They could be talking to my wife for an hour on whatever in Japanese. When I walk into the room, they turn back and they go, "Hey, papi, ni hao." It's a very natural channels that gets formed in their heads, and it's a habit that you develop. Because if you start switching around, or if you do things like Monday is English day and Tuesday is Japanese day and that kind of stuff, it's an artificial setting which makes it difficult. I mean, in my opinion, you can do it, of course. It's okay if that's your strategy, but for me, in my context, I guess I have a job that is really not related to languages. I have a living context that's not really evolving around language learning. I mold the language learning to my life, sort of way. So that's just the thinking behind not having language as a very artificial thing that you do. I mean, the language learning part. So instead, I make an environment that allows the children to absorb languages naturally without really thinking about it. They know that when they talk to daddy and grandpa, it's in Mandarin. And they know that when they talk to mommy and grandma, it's in Japanese. They know that when they go to their daycare, everybody speaks French. You know,
Oh.
and we have an au pair here. She's Mexican, and they know that when they speak to Angelica, it's in Spanish. It's just how it is. They don't question it. You know, they don't say it's hard. Oh, they don't complain about it. It's just life. You know, it's just something that happens in their life, and they're too young to really analyze the situation. So that's just how it is. They can't compare it to their friends. They don't go, hey, Johnny from whatever, you know, family. They only speak French at home. Yeah, they're too young to know that. So, and
What's that?
I was gonna say, by the time they can do that kind of analysis, it's already too late. They can already speak, you know, many languages.
That's funny.
So,
Yeah. But how do you create that kind of environment? Because I can see where you get the first two at least, and then if you have the opportunity of sending them to a foreign school, which, you know, around the world that's pretty popular. Like English schools, for instance, are very popular. So I can see three maybe. But what if, let's say you speak when you speak 5 languages, how do you create those last 2 or 3 environments for your kids?
So I agree with you. Really, getting to 3 is not too hard. That's one big message. When I talk to people, I think doing 3 is not hard in today's world. A lot of people are in cross-cultural marriages. A lot of people live in an area that's outside of their native language area. So you're an expat from a U.S. company to Japan, for example. Then right away you already have Japanese and English. All you need to do is do a little effort to go to a 3rd language, right? So doing 3 is quite achievable without major effort, I think. How I did 5 is really my living context. Like I cover Mandarin because I can speak it well, and it's a minority language, I guess, at least where I live. So Mandarin and Japanese are easy to do, just because I do the Mandarin and my wife does the Japanese part. And my children were born in Japan, and at that time I was doing Mandarin and Japanese, and I decided to go to Taiwan, go back to Taiwan for a bit, for family reasons, but also to reinforce the Chinese, the Mandarin, for my kid, and at the same time start English. Sent him to a little American daycare over there. So that covers English. So that's 3 languages that he was exposed to extensively for up to the time he was 3 years old. And then we came back to Canada. It's all in this grand scheme of things. We came back to Canada last July. My son had just turned 3. My daughter is not quite 2, 1.5. And in Quebec, as you know, we speak French here. So right away, the 4th language, French, is added to the mix by sending them to a daycare here. It's the most logical thing. And everybody, if you go outside, go outside, you meet people, everybody speaks French. That's the 1st language spoken here. And the 5th language, so I was talking earlier about choices. The choices that I'm teaching my children are very simple. There are 5 languages that I consider myself fluent in, and that even if I had to do them without me speaking them, these would be the same 5, because I think strategically it's a very good mix, but we can do on that later. But the 5th one is Spanish. I was thinking about how to do this. There's like Spanish people, Spanish immigrant gatherings and that kind of stuff is one way, and I was thinking a lot. Then I came upon the idea of au pair, which I write about very briefly in my book. Au pair is simply having sort of a child care personnel come in from outside your country help you with the children and some light housework, I guess. And having a person living in your house, you provide for the food and the sheltering, and that person can learn the culture here and learn life outside of their native country. So it's a great exchange, and having a person living in your house means that my children will be exposed to that person's language on a continuous basis. So that's how I integrated the fifth language into the mix. And these 5 are being used on a very balanced way. English is a little less right now. So they watch TV in English. And it's still keeping up right now. So it's not bad. They're still adding vocabulary as they watch the cartoons and all that in English. So these 5 are being maintained, like I said, on a very, very balanced way. We hope to be able to get more English later, but I mean, it's such a major language. I don't think they'll have too much trouble later to reinforce if they need to.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, English is everywhere, and it's gotten a little bit dark here, so it looks like I'm in a cave, but that's not entirely false, I guess. But so it seems like, from what I can understand, is that it doesn't really matter how many languages the parents speak. It's more about creating an environment for each language. So
absolutely,
if you only spoke Mandarin, let's say, you could easily put them in the French daycare anyway. That's not I mean, you don't need to speak French to go and enroll kids in the daycare, right?
No.
So that's one sort of preconception I'm glad you could solve, because I definitely thought so before we started recording. I was like,
I mean, daycare per se, by definition, is for kids that go before kindergarten, which is at 5. I mean, children start to speak, early kids start to speak at 1.5, and late kids could go up to 3, right? And these children at the daycare, a lot of them, they don't talk. I mean, my daughter is 2 and 2 months, and she can't speak too much yet. And all her, all her classmates, I think maybe a third to up to a half of them can speak, sort of start blabbering, but otherwise the other half, they just cry when they need things, right? So they learn together and they grow up together.
Oh, well, how cool. It's like a junior polyglot community in a way.
That's right. And I think one dangerous way to think is thinking you got to learn one language well first. So you're a, I don't know, Chinese immigrant in Canada or in the States, and you speak native Chinese, but you go out of your way to speak English to your kids because you think that they can't handle 2 languages at the same time. So you go out of your way using your broken English or with an accented English to talk to your kids in English, thinking you're doing them a favor. I think that's sort of a very, very different, dangerous way to think. I mean, they can handle 2, they can handle 3, they can handle 5 if the environment allows. So for us, it's just simultaneous. It's all at the same time. Just let them absorb as much as they can. And as you said earlier, also, later if they want to add more, that's fine. If they don't want it, if they don't like languages at all, fine. I mean, that's fine. As a parent, I give them the tools, the weapons they need to succeed in life. If they use it, great. If they don't use it and can survive in other ways, that's also fine. But I wouldn't want it to be the other way around. They need it, but they don't have it, and they got to start learning it,
Right. And you don't want to put unnecessary pressure on your kids. I mean, they have enough to deal with.
Exactly. So doing it naturally, like we do now, I'm not adding pressure. I mean, I totally disagree with the fact with people when they say that's going to cause a burden. They're going to be confused, and they're going to, grow up speaking, 5 or 4 languages, all like halfway, and they're not going to be
mixed up.
All mixed up, and they're gonna be delayed at school. They can't catch up with the other guys. I don't think
They'll find space in their brain. They'll reorganize them, and they'll
that's
assimilate
right.
and stuff. I mean,
That's right. They
I
can
guess
do
that's
much more than you think.
right.
You know, you don't want to go, well, I'm not a very good language learner, so my kids probably can't learn well either. You know, no, don't say that.
They're really good, yeah.
They're brilliant.
So I
They're
guess
all very brilliant.
a very good thing about this is it's really hard to fuck up in a way. I mean,
absolutely.
so that's one positive thing about parenting, because there are lots of ways you can make mistakes as a parent, I suppose. But I guess this language thing, as long as you keep it natural and don't make it a chore, then it's kind of hard to fuck it up.
That's exactly. No, and you hit the nail on the head. You don't want to make it a chore. You don't want to start giving them English exercises and books to read.
Right.
If they want, they like to read books, before going to bed. Just make sure that sometimes you read, you have Angelica read it in Spanish to them. You have my wife read it in Japanese with them. I pick out the Mandarin books. That's natural.
Right. Yeah. And do you think that this sort of natural method, tactic, or strategy you're running now, do you think that will change as they grow older? Or do you think that's just going to sort of evolve on its own and just basically run itself?
Well, my son's 3, my daughter's 2, so everything's still under control. But I do, I have seen in other families where children grow up and they become sort of like ashamed of their languages.
Okay.
They go to, they in a public space, if the parents start speaking in their native language to their children, they would sort of like, on purpose, not respond or respond in English. So I do worry that might come around one day. So again, one thing is to go early, so before they have that kind of self-consciousness, I guess, just let them absorb as much as possible. That's one way of mitigating this risk. And the other is really solidifying this one person, one language thing. I think when you have a habit, when you develop something that so much that it becomes weird to do it otherwise, then you'll just do it. Like, it's very weird for me to speak any other language than Mandarin with my dad. I can't possibly imagine speaking in English with my mother.
Right.
It's like the weirdest thing. And even when it's not your native language, I've experienced that when I came to Canada, I didn't speak any French. I was 13, and I was living with my aunt. She's my aunt, as in the youngest sister of my father. So her native language is Mandarin, but she had been living in Quebec for 20 years or something, and of course she speaks very well French. And in order for me to assimilate and integrate well into the Quebecer environment, she, spoke to me in French on purpose. The whole family was speaking to me in French all the time. So my uncle, who's a Quebecer, white Quebecer guy, I mean, of course, it's only normal for me to speak French with him. But at first, it was quite weird speaking in French. I mean, I didn't speak any French. So I had to force myself to learn quickly and to speak in French with my aunt. That was really strange. At first, it was weird. But,
right.
But then it developed to a point where, wow, now it's weird for me to speak Mandarin with her. Because it's a habit. You develop a habit and you speak in that language with that person, that target language in that target person. It just becomes weird otherwise. So in this case, I had to develop it a little bit. It took some time to get used to, but once you got used to it, you can't get rid of it. It's like smoking. People develop this habit of smoking, but once you get it, it takes a lot of effort to get rid of it. So whenever I meet my aunt, it's in French. It's just the most natural way to speak.
That's really interesting, because I went to after after school, I went to an English high school, which was, well, it was a Danish school, so there were lots of Danish people there too. But it was an English high school diploma called the IB diploma. I don't know if you've heard about it, but it's like a standardized education all around the world. And the working language was English, which meant that all the classes were in English. But because we were in Denmark, most people were Danish. So speaking to each other in English was very strange. And for a long time, I almost couldn't do it because it was so weird. And it wasn't really about the fact that I was used to speaking Danish with people because there were people I haven't met. There was just the fact that we had a better language in common. And I still have this today. If I, for instance, I don't do it so much anymore, but I used to play video games with some of my Danish friends, and we'd occasionally have people not from Denmark play with us. So we'd have to change our language to English, and it was really weird. And my accent would change, and I don't know what happens there. For me, I can totally understand if it takes some time if you found it weird to speak a different language after some time with a relative whom you've spoken exclusively in another language with. But yeah, I don't know if it's just habit or if there's also some kind of idea of, well, we both speak this language better, why don't we speak that? Is there some kind of logic
That's
also
right.
Stopping us?
So you have to develop that habit, and I don't know who said this. It's like a famous quote. It's like success is not anything extraordinary. It's not an extraordinary act or something like that. It's simply a habit.
Right, doing the right thing over and over.
Exactly, doing a simple thing over and over, and it develops into it. And I fully agree. So again, making an environment that's natural for the kids to speak that target language. You channel, they associate a language with a person. This is all very natural. Even when it's not natural at the beginning, when you develop into a habit, it can become natural.
Right.
And then you don't really think about it, you just do it. Right.
Fantastic. I hope that the listeners like myself are a lot more, I guess, relaxed in a way about the prospect of raising multilingual kids, because it seems like it's not as mysterious as one could fear.
It's not rocket science.
Right. Well, that's very reassuring, because I'm sure parenting has a lot of other complicated things you need to learn anyway.
In my book, I talk about this, and I've written about this on my blog a long time ago. This building a context, an environment for your children, and I came up with a word, an acronym. I call it CLAP, CLAP, and it stands for Contextual Language Acquisition Philosophy.
Oh.
Basically making a context, your living context for your kids. And one way, like I said, having these different people cover different languages, but also as your kids grow, as they become more and more human, I guess, they interact with other people, they play sports, they watch TV, they go on the internet, whatever you do, whatever they do every day, whatever they have to do or they like to do, they love to do, just add some language learning, elements to it.
Right.
So just make that context into the target language that you want them to learn. For example, when I was a kid, I loved remote control cars. I die for those. Those were rather expensive, but you see this motivation. I'd do anything for a remote control car. I'd go to a shop and talk to the guys at the shop about it, and all this was in Japan. I did have to do it in Japanese. And when my parents bought me remote control cars, they buy it from Japan so that they have all the instructions, everything's in Japanese, and I'd have to start learning how to read Japanese. But I do it just because I want to.
You like it, yeah.
I love it, and if learning to read in Japanese was the only obstacle, then hell, I'll do it. So that kind of stuff, watching TV is another very simple thing. Kids, they watch TV, they can watch the same DVD like over and over and over and over and over, right? There's no better way of getting them to learn a target language than to just have them repeat the same
Right.
things over and over. So just put it in I don't know, Danish or German, whatever, because at 2, they don't know the difference anyways. They just love to watch it. Just put that language on and they'll absorb.
Right. And yeah, that's like I said, it's a very reassuring to hear. And I'm sure that a lot of people, I know that the demographic of 25 to 35-year-olds is pretty significant in the polyglot community, and I suppose that's when a lot of people would have children. So I thought that would be a good time to introduce this topic, which I've been thinking about for some time. So
wow, that's great. Well, thanks.
so thank you for covering it.
Timely. It is timely. I at the Polyglot conference, I asked this question about how the market looks like. So they had a session with the publishers and all.
Yeah.
So they talk about all these books for students learning languages, and I was asking them, do you cover books that for parents to raise multilingual children? As polyglots, I mean, chances are good that we think languages are important, and chances are good that we'll want to raise our children, speaking different languages. So it should be a huge market, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But it's a difficult topic. And there's a few experts out there, from what I gather, on the internet, but they're not, there's not a huge population of them. And at least I want to, from a business perspective, if I ever bring this into a good business, I would like to cover Japan. Like, there's a lot of parents in Japan that want their children to grow up speaking English well. So it's a huge market.
Yeah. So how would you in short, if you live in a country where English is not spoken widely and you don't really speak English that well, that, how do you then, is it finding that English school, that English daycare, finding that English au pair if you can, or are there any other things you can do, for instance?
If you have foreigners at your company, for example, expats come to your country, you can talk to them. They're likely wanting to learn your native language, and you want to learn English from them. Why not have family gatherings, periodically, have your children play together, right? There's meetups, where people just gather and have dinner and just talk in a target language. It's English, right? There's various types of meetups, whether it's to learn English specifically, or if it's for hiking, or going to onsens in Japan, these hot springs. These are all great social gatherings where you can make it a purpose of yours to meet foreigners, and force yourself to interact in that language, and try to find people, make it a family event where the children will be around, and you can exchange your native language with their native language, right in your backyard.
Right.
There's a never-ending list of things that you can think about to do.
All right, that's good. Before we call it end on this episode of the podcast, I just wanted to briefly touch on the North American Polyglot Symposium, because that's a very new thing. But why don't you just introduce it to everyone who hasn't heard about it, and how you came up with it?
Yes, the NAPS, North American Polyglot Symposium. We're about about eight of us that met at the New York conference in October, the Polyglot conference in New York City. We thought we needed something more periodic, something that's on North American soil on an annual basis, because the Polyglot conference Richard and Ellen and Alex and those guys. It's more of a European thing. So I think this is the New York City event was the first time it was on North American soil, and the next time it's going to be in Greece. So we thought we should, if we can, have something that's annual for North America, that'd be great. So some of us just got together, we talked about it, and we had a poll on many of these polyglot Facebook pages to see which city would be good for an annual event of this type. And New York City came up again. There's Chicago and Los Angeles, and various cities came up, and Montreal was part of it. And Montreal won it out. And me being a local to the Montreal area, and a few of other guys from Montreal, and a few guys from the States, we got together. We said, okay, we're going to be the organizers for this one. And it's going to happen on July 23rd, 24th, 2016 in Montreal. And all the planning is going on right now. We have weekly meetings, and hopefully we can gather a good crowd. I mean, we've already talked to folks like Steve Kaufman, for example. He's very interested in contributing and speaking at the event. We're still contacting a few other guys to, get some big names, and some local folks, including myself. I'll be speaking also, but we've contacted some academic experts from McGill, Concordia's. It's going to be a nice polyglot gathering event, a variety of topics, including, of course, how to learn languages, but definitely some of the academic parts of it, and also like myself, I'll be talking about how to raise the next generation into multilinguals, and some business aspects. I'm talking to Oli. Hopefully Oli would be able to make it. He could definitely provide a lot of insights into how to make a business out of languages and whatnot, right?
So a little bit of everything for everyone, basically.
Absolutely. And Montreal is a very, very multicultural, multi-ethnic city. So you can't. Now, in retrospect, I think you can't have a better place to do this event, especially now that New York City was taken last year. So this year in Montreal, I think it's a great place to do this first NAPS event.
Yeah, you know what? I always wanted to go to Canada since, a long time ago, because I learned that, I don't remember when I heard this the first time, but then Canadians have been compared to Danes for a while.
Well, yeah.
In the way that, we're sort of very free. We have universal health care. We have, like, we don't mind people taking the piss out of us, So in a way, I've always felt that connection to Canada since it's a long time. I remember where people are like, Denmark is like the Canada of Europe, and Canada is like the Denmark of North America, whatever. I don't know how true that connection is, but
I think so. I think the social system is very similar.
Yeah, it's pretty close, and so I always wanted to go, and now you bring this up. I'd really love to make it if. The only problem, the universal problem, of course, is finances, because the flight from Europe is going to be maybe, I don't know, 500 euros or something to Canada. So, if I can find 500 euros lying around somewhere, then I'll definitely, because that's the one thing I really love about these polyglot events around the world, is that first and foremost, they're obviously a great event to be at, but secondly, or maybe thirdly or whatever, that for me is just an excuse to travel and see different parts of the world without having to, just randomly commit to a city, like saying, oh, I'm going to Los Angeles, and people are like, why are you going there? I'm like, I don't know. But now I'm going to Montreal because there's a polyglot event, and I'll check out the city, So, so for me, it's great that there's such a variety, Greece, New York City, Montreal, Berlin every year, of course, as well. I think I know that city now, but anyway, it's just a good excuse and to meet up with the family, so to speak.
Yeah,
It really feels like a family, and
it does. It
it's
does. It
awesome.
was a great atmosphere in New York. I really loved it. These when you get a bunch of people with the same tastes, I guess, same hobbies, same likings, good things happen.
Yeah,
Because we're all
exactly.
supportive of each other. We're not competitors. You know,
No, there's no
so
judgment. There's no
exactly. We
criticism.
all know the difficulties involved in learning languages. We all share, the pain and the hopes and just support each other. And it's just a great family, like you say. It's a great family
Exactly.
to be in.
So I love the circuit, and I'd love to travel more in the future. So just going around on the circuit, that would be nice, wouldn't it? Like, I
Yeah,
don't know what to compare it to, but it's good fun anyway. And
absolutely,
and you see a different parts of the
absolutely.
world. So, well, I want to just say it's awesome that you guys are putting it on, because I know that it takes a lot of work to organize these things, and
Yeah, it's a
you
lot
might.
of things to think about.
Right, exactly. It's a huge task, and I know that it's not exactly usually a huge economical gain at the end of it. So I just want
Yeah,
to really say a great job on making it happen, making some action happen, because I know that North America has so many polyglots and so many language interested people that it's almost a shame that you didn't start it 10 years ago,
yeah.
but who would have known, right?
Well, thanks to Richard and those guys to really make the polyglot community come together.
Exactly.
Um,
I mean,
and it's happening. We're living this at the current time, this expansion of the polyglot community and the awareness of polyglots at a global level. And I think this is a great movement to be on. Personally, I think it's better now than like you said. If it had been around forever, then we're just one of them. But we're
Yeah.
actually one of the first ones right now, and we're setting the pace. We're the ones, where we're following Richard and Alex and all these, top guys. But it's still a great time to be in this expansion phase. I think it's a lot of fun.
I definitely agree, and I think it will only get bigger, and
That's right.
I think we can get more people interested in languages if they want, of course, and
Yeah,
we can show the value of multilingualism
yeah,
across the world. We can bridge cultural gaps, and we can
that's
stop
right.
wars, and yeah,
In 1 year, 3 year, 5 years, we'll be the established folks, just like alongside the Richards and the Bennies and all those guys.
yeah, for sure. I mean, if you
Yeah,
have no, when you have a good event here in 2016, I mean, that's going to be a yearly goal for people to like.
yeah,
Right now, a lot of people in Europe are saying, "I'll see you in Berlin next year," right?
uh-huh,
They just know that event is going on, and
yeah,
same people in North America will start saying, "So I'll see you in Montreal next year,"
yeah.
or
I
wherever
hope
you
so.
decide
I
to go.
really hope so.
Well, you will, yeah. Why not?
And yeah, because we call it the North American Polyglot Symposium because we think it's going to be in a different North American city every year. But if it can become a Canadian thing or even just a Montreal thing, it'd be great.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
like
you
I said
gotta.
earlier, we
Yeah.
have Steve Kaufman come in. He's a Canadian,
Yeah.
to represent our country in a brilliant way. So
Yeah, we all
it's a
love
good way to
Steve.
start.
We all love
That's right.
Steve. We're big fans of. I love his
Yeah.
YouTube
I mean,
videos. And,
phenomenal. This guy is phenomenal. I've met him in person, I've had dinner with him. He's just amazing. So,
yeah, I want to meet Steve. That's one of the reasons I want to go
yeah.
to Canada as well.
Well, there you go.
For
There you go.
sure.
It'll be a great chance for that.
I hope I can make it. Like I said, it's the only limiting factor truly is just the cost. It's
Yeah.
probably a $600 ticket.
Yeah.
700.
Understandable. Understandable.
But whatever, life is life. You have to live sometimes.
That's right.
I'll just save on some other stuff instead. I think
Yeah.
experience is more important than stuff, right? So
Correct. You're
it's
not
all
going to
good.
bring that money into the grave.
Right, exactly. We all end up broke anyway. So it's a good point. Might as well use it while you're alive.
That's right.
And now we got really, really philosophical at the end here, but but I just wanted to thank you for taking the time. And am I mistaken that it's actually your birthday today?
Oh, you're
Or
not mistaken.
well,
It's
because I just wanted to say happy birthday and thank
what
you
a
twice
coincidence, huh?
for
What a coincidence.
for taking time out of your personal day to be with the actual fluency audience.
No, no, no.
It's really super
Really,
cool.
the honor is mine. I mean, I just never expected this when you contacted me. It was really, really flattering, and I want to thank you to take time to listen to my story.
Well, you're very welcome. I
It's
love you.
doubly happy because it's my birthday, but hey.
Well, that's
So final
fantastic.
trivia, just a final trivia. My birthday, the 11th of February, is actually the same day as Thomas Edison's birthday,
Wow.
which is the little thing. But the big thing is whole Japan. It's the national. It's like the July 4th of Japan. It's like
Wow.
so like the whole Japan is celebrating for me. I always say that to all my colleagues.
That's awesome.
It's unfortunate we're not coming to work, but you can still celebrate for me.
Well, that's cool. That must must make you very sort of proud of your country in a way when you have
well,
the same
Japan.
day.
I'm not a Japanese citizen. My mother's Japanese. I'm definitely half Japanese biologically, and I do consider myself very Japanese from a cultural perspective,
Right.
just as much as I am Taiwanese. I'm a citizen of Canada, so I always say I'm a Canadian because Canada has played a tremendous part in shaping and forming me, and this is where I live, right? This is where I carry out my life now. But global citizen, but with three specific places where I tie myself to, I guess, associate myself with.
That's awesome. Yeah, you can pick the best parts of each, and
That's I always do. I always do.
awesome. Well, I hope to stay in touch with you and definitely meet you in Montreal if you don't make it to Europe before, of course. But there's always Berlin,
Yeah.
If you make
Absolutely.
it over, then
I'll try my best.
All right, cool. Well, thank you so much, and have a great birthday, and see you around.
Thank you very much. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Actual Fluency Podcast.